Okay. Okay. Welcome to the Shadow Tech Alchemy biweekly Zoom call. I am Colin Davis,
And I am Melissa Murray.
and it is the 25th of March, 2023. And today our subject is we've talked about evil and the shadow in so many different ways, and we have repeated ourselves. And part of the reason I keep talking about this, in fact, probably the biggest reason why I keep doing the same podcast or broadcast about this, is because I'm trying to figure it out, and putting myself under the pressure to have to explain it to an audience is really helpful. And
And it's an incredibly important subject, probably the subject that
yeah,
everyone kind of pushes into the shadow,
literally.
because where you go with it is what people don't want to accept.
Right. I mean, that's sort of and we're going to tie the connection here between what we call evil and the shadow very clearly. And that's exactly what it is. And that's exactly what the shadow is. It's everything we don't want to accept about ourselves. Everything. And I before we go into the evil part, we might want to just kind of back up, because when I get into the shadow, I don't think I'm really going to define it that much. And so maybe I should just kind of redefine it right up front, and then we can kind of touch on it again.
Yeah, because a lot of people are talking about it these days, but a lot of people haven't done the research or have the deeper understanding of what it is, or read a lot of Carl Jung,
Right.
or any Jungians who
Yeah.
followed. And so shadow work has become a meme in the culture now, but you'll find that there's a lot of people that don't know what they're talking about.
Put the microphone right there. Well, yeah, I think mainly people that talk about shadow work, they're on to the right subject,
Right.
and they know
It
generally what
is
it
an
is.
important subject,
But
but
so the if you just understand that we have a conscious aspect of our mind and an unconscious aspect of our mind, and that most of our mind is unconscious. Mind is the same as psyche, and that most of it is unconscious. Perhaps 95% of the psyche is unconscious. We're not aware of it, but that there is sort of a boundary field that separates what's conscious from what's unconscious. And most of what's going on in the unconscious doesn't need to be made conscious. And all of the sort of automatic operations of the psyche have been worked out over millions of years. But there's a particular category of unconscious material that is what Carl Jung called the shadow. And so the shadow is unconscious material, which is unconscious, is psychic material, thoughts, feelings, impulses, drives, memories, images, all kinds of stuff of the mind, which is in the unconscious.
also biological, more animal instinctual.
Well, right. Well, I'm just going to define it in the most broadest way first. The broadest way to define it is that it's anything mental, psychic, emotional, or otherwise, that is in the unconscious, but that needs to come into consciousness, but it can't get up there because it's being blocked. So they call that repression in psychology and in Jungian psychology. So it's so now, what is it specifically? What would need to come up but can't? Because, like I said, most psychic material doesn't need to come up. It's doing what it's doing. It's quite mysterious, the psyche, but whatever is happening, it's kind of like with the body. there's all these processes in the body that you don't need to be aware of. And when you feel pain or you see some symptom, that's because you need to start becoming aware of something that's going on in the body. Well, it's the same thing with the psyche. So what don't you what would you actively be repressing? What is the conscious mind trying to shove down and not let into consciousness? And so in the Jungian explanation of this, the stuff that's being repressed and not allowed into consciousness is the stuff that would destroy your worldview, would destroy or harm, I should say, harm or destroy, harm, let's say harm, would harm your worldview, would harm the way you see yourself as an individual, and would harm society and the moral and ethical boundaries of society.
And also your own ego.
That's what I said, the way you think about yourself.
Yeah.
So that would be
your persona
in the Jungian sense. That's the stuff, that's the main product of the shadow. And so that happens to be it's really, you go down to the bottom of it and it's the most primal animalistic stuff. And if you look at how animals, all kinds of different animals behave, I mean, they have their own basic instinctual ethical boundaries, but they behave in all kinds of ways that if human beings were to behave in those ways, our society would be ripped apart immediately. So we repress in all this kind of primal drives, stuff that chimpanzees and baboons would do that we just can't do. We repress all kinds of sexuality, stuff that we're animals, like, they do have their own instinct determining when mating is appropriate, but, there's all kinds of instincts to procreate that have to be shoved down. And when people are compelled to act out their sexual drives outside of the social norms, then we call that rape, we call that abuse, we call that a crime, we call that evil. And so this goes for everything that is primal and everything, it's manipulation of other people, it's using power inappropriately, it's all kinds of aggression and violence. It's all the most primal stuff that's in the human psyche, but which really doesn't have a place in society. That's the main that's the main bulk of what's in the shadow in the Jungian idea. Then there's the golden shadow, and the golden shadow is, I guess you could have it at the personal and the cultural level, but the golden shadow is really is brilliance and genius that is in all of us, but which might be so unique, so novel that it can't find its place into the world, or you were taught to repress it because your parents didn't want you to become a dancer or become a musician, or when you started to show some of your brilliance in this or that way, it was ignored. And so we also can have a lot of brilliance in our unconscious that's also shadow material. It needs to make its way into consciousness, but it can't because it's repressed, because there's various there's a field of cognitive dissonance that's keeping it back. So that's the shadow, and the idea in Jungian psychology for individuation, which is the process of conscious development of yourself. is that one of the primary things that you're doing is that you are consciously getting in touch with anything that's repressed, anything that's in the shadow, and you're analyzing it, you're communicating with it, you're finding cathartic or artistic methods for getting access to it and working with it. You're incorporating it somehow in a symbiotic way into your lifestyle and putting it into your persona and letting other people see these things about you. And there's a whole kind of methodology to get access to your shadow and to find some kind of a conscious arrangement with it, and try to basically transmute the shadow, which is destructive, into its most constructive equivalent, and then put that into the world and put that into your life. That's the whole shadow, and people are intuiting, because they're looking at Western culture. Let's just stay with the West, of how pathological things are getting, and they're seeing anyone that's tuned in to what the shadow is, what the definition of the shadow is. Anybody that's tuned into this is looking at the culture, at the society, and going, hey, wait a minute, this is a lot of shadow stuff that's finding all kinds of pathological ways of getting out into the world. And people are getting sick, and people are suffering from chronic disease like they've never had. And there's thousands of new syndromes and diseases, and it's starting to dawn on our civilization.
That's just part of it. And then we have all the corruption and the parasitism.
Yeah, they're seeing all that, and they're going, okay, and they're starting to make the connection. Hey, wait a minute, this is shadow stuff. They're looking at Jung's definition, and they're going, hey, this has to be approached, and people are starting to touch on and all this. And so now, okay, with that defined, in a general way, I want to make the connection with what we know to be evil, and how does evil in the shadow, how can we draw a relation to that? Now, I'm going to read to you a definition from this book called The Devil, from Jeffrey Burton Russell, and he has a whole series. Robert Moore is the guy that mentioned this series. He's got 4 books on the devil, Lucifer, and the subtitle of this book is Perceptions of Evil from Antiquity to Primitive Christianity. And he's got 4 of these that deal with the subject of evil and the way we culturally deal with it. And so to start with a definition that kind of maybe just kind of puts things on the table, I'll just read the first paragraph here. He says, the essence of evil is abuse of a sentient being, a being that can feel pain. It is the pain that matters. Evil is grasped by the mind immediately and immediately felt by the emotions. It is sensed as hurt deliberately inflicted. The existence of evil requires no further proof. I am, therefore I suffer evil. Abuse of a sentient being, consciously abusing someone or some group, consciously or in some way knowingly inflicting pain. That's a definition he gives right there. And I would say that everybody in our civilization would agree that that's at least partially the definition of evil.
But he didn't mention the unconscious.
Yeah, and right. And so I've just started with this book, and I've kind of cut into it a little bit. And I can see that his understanding of this subject is very deep and much deeper than what you just might think from that first paragraph. But what I wanted to do is put that on the table, because that is kind of a common a belief about what evil is, you know, and that's how our laws are structured. So, you know, there is a defense in law against being punished for committing evil, in that you were out of your mind when you did it, right? You were mentally incapacitated. So what he just said in there is in our system, that you need to be conscious of the fact that you're committing evil for it to be punishable in the same way. But what I would say is that just to add to that and bring more context to that, now we're going to kind of shift over to the definition of evil. We define the shadow. We're going to connect them together. But so evil exists on a spectrum. Okay, first of all, evil is a cultural and social, or let's say it is a behavioral phenomenon. Primarily, when we talk about evil, when you just interview people, it's about behavior. That quote there was about behavior. It's about people behaving in ways which break moral boundaries, ethical boundaries, cultural, social boundaries. And there's another aspect of this that has to be pointed out, and that is that evil behavior, what we in our civilization, or what any civilization considers to be evil, is subjective to a degree and rooted in that civilization's mindset. You know, the Mayans are sacrificing human beings, right? And that's not evil to them in a certain context. There's some groups in the Pacific that are in certain contexts are cannibals. Right. Yeah, you got it. They're eating each other. It's not anytime, anywhere. It's in a certain kind of ritualistic fashion. But those are examples of how societies, those are just a couple examples of how societies can differ, even in what, you know, the far edges of evil, because cannibalism and human sacrifice in our civilization are at the extreme end of evil. So evil, though, at the same time, is also a spectrum for all societies. It's a spectrum of breaking cultural boundaries, subjective to that culture, but it's on a spectrum where let's put cannibalism and first degree murder and sacrifice and all that, you know, human sacrifice and all that. Let's put that on the far end. But then you can kind of back off from that, and you can see all kinds of, you know, you have first degree murder, but then you have second degree murder. And then you have, what is it called when somebody is complicit or an accessory to a crime, right? And so you have this sort of spectrum where behavior can be completely abhorrent, but then it can be somewhat abhorrent, or it can be somewhat destructive. Then you kind of get to, over here, you get to what Hannah Arendt called the banality of evil. And this is understood when you witness an episode of hysteria, of collective hysteria,
or mass, people know the term
genocide and
mass formation psychosis,
collective hysteria, you know, mass hysteria, mass psychosis, these kind of things where you have these revolutions that turn into coup d'etats and genocides and all this kind of stuff. What you have, I mean, Hannah Arendt was writing about what was going on in Nazi Germany, but you know, you have this in China, you have this in Russia, and then we had a more mild version of this with the coronavirus pandemic. And this is where a lot of people got in our generation, in our time, got to we got to see this phenomenon of the banality of evil. And this is where you have millions of people, really. You have a big chunk of the society going along to get along, is what we say. You have people who are in all kinds of positions who are watching evil, abhorrent behavior take place around them where they could do something to stop it or to slow it, but they don't because they're afraid, because it's because generally because they're afraid of repercussions. They're afraid of losing their jobs. They're afraid of losing their membership to a certain community.
Right, their friendships,
their peer groups, their church, whatever it is. So you have all kinds of ways in which people turn a blind eye, we say, and they allow sort of a domino effect or a chain reaction of destructive behavior to happen. And then, according to the Nuremberg Code, which was established after World War II, it was established in law that you can't say, "I was told to do it." I was just doing my job is the phrase, and that has been written into law. That now that was ignored during the coronavirus pandemic. And so we can see that the Nuremberg Code isn't very deeply inscribed into law because it's pretty recent. But that's kind of also part of the spectrum of evil. So evil being abhorrent, highly destructive human behavior on a spectrum from one side to the other. That's kind of the behavioral definition of evil. You also can take evil and you can put it into the domain of culture, and you can see how it's cultural information, like, pornography, it's just a magazine or a video or something, a book in a library, but people will say, no, this is evil. And that's because what they're saying basically is that this information, this cultural information, has the power to trigger compulsions in human beings, which will then become behavioral evil. That's what they're saying with that. And so that kind of takes me into the this idea of evil as a compulsion, and evil in the personal state, because this is another domain where people will say, oh, I detect evil. And that's where we're talking about I'm going to go into Ken Wilber's 4 quadrants in a minute, but that's where you're kind of in the upper left-hand quadrant. That's where you're talking about the personal psychic state where evil, this thing we're calling evil, can exist. This is where someone says, I felt this myself, growing up in New York City, you're standing on the subway platform and there's somebody not too far away from you, and you can just feel that person is out of their mind. They might try to push me into the subway track, a feeling of something evil coming off of another person. Or if you interview someone who's convicted of a heinous crime and ask them, well, what was going on in your mind? Well, they could either say, I don't remember, because it was blocked. It was blocked out. Cognitive dissonance, denial, dissociation, however you want to describe that. Or they will say, I was compelled to do it. Something came over me, right? In some cases where people have a certain mythological worldview, they will say, this spirit or this demon made me do it. This is very common. Either they say, I was just compelled, something came over me, or they say, I actually saw and heard from this entity. So this is where we take evil and we put it into the domain of the personal first person subjective experience of the psyche. And here I would answer this by saying that this is kind of where it all roots back. And we started our discussion with the idea of the shadow as a personal issue, a personal problem where we're shoving down our destructive drives. And we come back to that now and we say, all right, let's talk about how evil can be a compulsion. Something made me do it. What you're talking about here is, back to Jung, we're talking about an autonomous complex. You're talking about a dissociated part of the psyche that is actually sort of has a simple personality and is compelling the individual to take actions. That's still in the, that's back into the shadow. But that's where we're talking about shadow energy as an active type of complex with agency that's moving the individual to take action. Because shadow energy, when it's repressed, it isn't just like water that you put up a dam and you repress the flow of water, and then and then it forms cracks and then the water comes through. What actually happens is, if you take a dam and you slow the water, then what happens is all kinds of things about the flow of the water change. The speed of the water changes, the temperature of the water changes, and then you get all kinds of organic communities that form in that reservoir there, and you get a whole ecosystem out of the fact that you have this blocked energy, this blocked flow. Well, that's the same thing that happens in the psyche. When you repress your shadow, you basically create an ecosystem, an environment where psychic entities, so to speak, and I don't want to mythologize that and make that too crazy sounding, but organic entities end up forming there, and then they end up compelling you.
Yeah, you can also call them parts.
Parts,
the
IFS system. It's a very good system for understanding this. So you have an active component to the shadow where you have this energy that's back there, and obviously, when people say, I was compelled to commit this crime, I was compelled, they're serial killers, or they just shot someone on the street, or whatever they did, they were compelled to do this. The splinter psyche or autonomous complex or part that's doing the compelling is actually doing it as a way to release this energy. That autonomous part, that autonomous complex that has you compelled. And it could be a simple addiction or just an argument with your husband or wife, or it could go as far as to shooting somebody or doing something heinous. This is energy that's getting to flow through this agency.
Also, the part or the autonomous complex, if you again go back to IFS, it's a protective mechanism to not have to feel possible trauma. This could be because most people who actively do some sort of a crime, most of them are incredibly traumatized.
Yes.
So they already have a crack in their psyche.
Right. Now,
so when you're if you've come to the point where this part is able to take you over like that, it's like a flip side of this part. This part is just trying to make itself known, and to in some cases to try to protect in a in a really
Yes.
inverted way
Yes.
to protect
A very dysfunctional reactive part that is somehow serving the psyche at a very primitive and from a traumatized, twisted kind of perspective.
Right.
Yes. So and so that's an important point, actually, how that people who have who end up becoming very dysfunctional in society and then behaving in ways that we would call evil somewhere in the spectrum are people who are not able to process and properly repress their primal energy because they're traumatized, because and that trauma passes on genetically, epigenetically. So now I want to say I've got a couple more things on here, but the very existence of the shadow, the very fact that we have this dam, that we have this semi-permeable boundary between conscious and unconscious, and that we have this cognitive dissonance that holds this shadow material back so that it can't make itself out into the world, and then it ends up exploding out or leaking out in all kinds of ways. And that's the banality of evil part. It leaks out.
It can also do a reverse mechanism and a more passive on the individual itself through victimization, physical disabilities.
Yes, absolutely. You're always going to have, right. So if I describe the active compulsive aspect of the shadow that becomes evil,
right,
the passive sort of entropic side of it is basically a degradation, right? A degradation, an inability to actually heal yourself, to actually control yourself, and sort of just a passive giving in to these powerful energetics.
Yes.
But so the thing is about this is that so which way I want to go here. I'll continue to say what I'm saying, and then I'll kind of back up a little bit. That the reason why we have the shadow, and the big point I want to make here, is that it becomes evil, right? Evil is the behavioral and cultural equivalent to the shadow in the personal psyche. And that everything that we call evil, and as we've defined it so far, is basically just the effect or symptom of the human shadow at the personal level. And that's a huge realization, because once you kind of have defined the shadow and that's what it is, and it's real and it's not woo-woo and it's real, and once you've defined evil and said here's what it is and what it isn't and stuff, then boom, they go right together, and you realize, oh, wait a minute, this is causing this. Well, that connection was already made by Jung 70, 80 years ago or whatever. I mean, he kind of tiptoed around it a little bit because he was trying to stay, not interfere with theologians at the time and other kind of scientists and stuff at the time. But now I think we can just kind of put it together real bluntly like that. We create evil in the world because we have a repressed shadow. Mm-hmm. And these are all the ways in which it manifests. And so once you make that jump, that connection there,
this is where people start to get cognitive dissonance.
Then you get cognitive dissonance. And then because you have such a huge responsibility, then you realize, oh, wait a minute. Okay, I got to do something about this. I'm part of the problem. I don't even know where to start. And that looks like a bottomless pit. and filled with demons, and what am I going to do? And so that's a big problem. We can talk about that. But I also want to say right now, another big part of the conundrum, and another reason why we go into denial over this, is that the very way in which the psyche is constructed, and with, like I was saying, with this permeable membrane between conscious and unconscious, the let me say it like this. Jung said that the equal opposite of the shadow is the persona. And so you have shadow material is on a spectrum, just like consciousness is a spectrum. And the persona is sort of the outer layer of the conscious ego that deals with society, how you look to society, how the roles you play, how people see you and characterize you, your identity. And Jung said that, well, the shadow is really the equal opposite to that. And what he means by that is that the way in which Freud would tie this domain with what he called the superego. The very structures that we put together that allow complex societies like ours to work are the mechanisms, they are the structures which create the shadow in the first place. If we have so many, all the ways in which we grow up and all the ways in which we are culturally programmed, culturally constrained, this is good, this is not good. And it differs from family to family and subculture to subculture. This is good, this is not good, this is healthy, this is not healthy, this is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is evil, right? And we need to create those boundaries to have an organized society like this. But by the very fact that we're doing that and creating all those boundaries, we're shoving all this stuff down. This is good, you can go that way, but this is bad, you can't go that way. Well, what about that impulse in me that wants to go that way? Where does that go?
Well,
that gets shoved down.
Yeah, but then okay, I'm gonna just say it,
Okay.
as far as cultural
Yes.
evil
Yes.
and the cultural shadow,
Yes.
Since the whole postmodernism,
Yes.
and the green movement, and
Yes.
when those boundaries were basically
Right.
broken down
Right.
in the 60s,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So it started to flip
Right.
to the other side, where you get to where we're at now, where there's no boundaries.
Anything's allowed.
Right.
A man can be a woman. This,
you can be a child,
you do this, you get out of jail for free, it's just
blockers and shave.
politicians, judges can do whatever the hell they want as long as they're on the right political side. I mean, it's falling apart like crazy.
Right. So
because those collective boundaries, right, those Judeo-Christian boundaries that were there to create an organized society at the expense of repressing the shadow. This is what I'm trying to say. You create an organized society by making these boundaries that makes a shadow by default, and then that pushes on consciousness until it finally breaks.
Right.
And then that's where we have right now.
That's where we're at. And I think that's really important because a lot of people, there's some people that are talking about it now, but they're, you go from the 60s until now, and you can kind of track to see how we got to where we're at. But not too many people talk about how the shadow, that the shadow of these humans,
mm-hmm.
who were, some of them were already traumatized.
Yes. Of course, it leaks out easiest and the compulsions are the easiest to manifest when people are traumatized, right?
Right. And
Yeah.
each generation gets more and more traumatized,
Yeah.
through epigenetics and the
Right.
cultural
Right.
stimulation, and now we have the computers and the social media,
Yeah.
and so each generation becomes more and more out of touch.
When you're right, when the society, when the civilization is in the downswing,
Right.
right? And that's what we're experiencing right now because everything has a life cycle.
Yes.
So does the civilization. And so it
Right.
goes into a downswing. And when it does, this is where this is the dark night of the soul for the end of, for the civilization. And that's when all the shadow stuff comes up.
Right. And this is and so a lot of people are saying, why is this happening? And this
Part of it is that what I just said
yeah,
is
but
it's Edinger's psychic life cycle,
right.
right? So this is a natural life cycle of the civilization.
But what you're really saying, and you can, that each generation was not looking at their own shit, was not looking at their own shadow. They were just still in the
Right.
external.
That's right. Just
And
keep building, keep running away,
and
flying
not,
away from it.
even in the spiritual quote unquote new age, whatever you want, communities, there's a lot of bypassing going on, and
All spiritual communities.
they're like pushing down all
They're
this
repressing
shadow.
too.
They're just
different
saying, oh,
kinds.
got to get non-dual, go out there towards
Right.
the light,
Right.
everything's
Right.
love and
Right. Escapism.
light. And then all this shadow stuff is just
Yes.
getting repressed down.
Yes.
So
So you'll have the New Age community, and they might be repressing this type of shadow material. Then you have the Christian or the Muslim community; they'll be repressing a different type of material.
right.
And everybody's in repression mode. I remember Robert Morse once said that Americans are in manic denial of their own shadows. And I think that's a very that's a very good point. And we're manic to run away from. And then of course, and we didn't mention, I just go all the way back around and say, how do we cope with this shadow besides it leaking out? Just, we said it leaked out, we said it creates compulsions, but the actual mechanism in which we can collectively dump our shadow stuff, and this is what Jung called the collective shadow, this is the mass formation, the way in which we can do this, and we do it at the personal level, but it's also very powerful at the collective level, is when we project. So we take our own shadow material, and then we can't handle it, and so we see it and feel it and perceive it in others. And when a whole bunch of us have the same shadow material, the same particular makeup of shadow material, because it's subcultural and it is collectivizes by demographic. And so what we do is we get together with our friends and neighbors, and we select a target, a Donald Trump or a Vladimir Putin or a Saddam Hussein, and we then collectively project that's the evil one, and then we go vote for the politician or whoever who will kill the evil one, right? And in that way, we bring all this destruction to the world. But the mechanism, the way we actually get the ball rolling, is through projection. But again, it's so, okay. So I think I've kind of put the whole thing out there. The last thing I would say, like I said, I would mention the four quadrants, Ken Wilber's four quadrants, and I've shared that before. It's on my computer somewhere. I'll just say that if anybody's interested in integral theory and knows the four quadrants, it's fantastic in that it allows you to see one domain, one subject, one area through four lenses of perspective. First person I, second person we, third person it, or third person plural its. And so what you can do is you can take our subject here of evil in the shadow, and you can plop it into the four quadrants, and you can see all the different areas that are connected. So again, the shadow is in the upper left-hand quadrant, in which is the first person I. This is where evil is experienced within me. This is where compulsions are experienced within me. This is where shadow states of aggression or grief or guilt or rage or whatever are felt within me. Then you go to the lower left-hand quadrant. That's where you talk about culture. And this is where we have a we. This is where we have a shared understanding. And this is more of an informational domain of culture. It's informational and relational. And then you go to the upper right-hand quadrant where you have it. And that's where this is the actual behavior that you can study. This is criminology that you can actually study, where people are actually committing acts. It's also the actual way in which the body, the physical body, because that's an it also, the physical body manifests all these symptoms. When you see that connection, you go, oh, the repressed shadow creates cultural evil, let's say like Marxism, communism, totalitarianism, all kinds of ways of explaining cultural evil. It also creates disease and symptoms in the body, and it creates destructive behavior. And then on the lower right-hand quadrant, where it's the social structures, it creates integrated corruption, right? Where you've got all kinds of legal ways in which corporations can pay politicians to pass the laws that they want so that they can sell toxic products to the public, and everybody ends up getting poisoned,
or
you can through institutions.
You can pay off universities to
write papers that then you use for your scientific proof, and it's all fake. Where half of scientific papers are fake now.
Right.
And so that's evil too. So by using the four quadrants, now boom, now you've got this whole holistic connection between evil and the shadow and pathology and destructive behavior and all kinds of disease. It's all one big happy ecosystem of self-destructiveness. And so that kind of, I think I just made the whole kind of spiel there. And this could have been made. These connections could have been made before. People could have been really explicit about, we've known about the shadow, personal and collective, since Jung's time. All kinds of people have written about it and really gone into it and made it clear. Robert Moore did. I got books by Murray Stein. There's all kinds of Jungians that have gone into this, but I haven't seen them expressly stating, hey, wait a minute, you got all these problems with evil. That's your shadow. What are you going to do about it?
Right. See, this is, and this is.
But then the second thing is, and then we've had the four quadrants, and the integral community has been working on the four quadrants, but nobody put evil and the shadow in there to take a look.
Right. So then you have to add on top of that why people that are red-pilled have more of an opportunity to finally go to this level of understanding evil and start to turn it onto themselves, right?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, so you could
Okay, yeah,
that.
yeah. Red pill community. So pill community is the growing community of millions of people all over the world who are looking at the symptoms, right? They're looking at the effects. They're looking at cultural evil, societal evil. In Wilber's 4 quadrants, it's the bottom 2 quadrants. And they're looking at that all the time. But they're not looking that much at all at the personal shadow, upper left-hand quadrant. And let's see if I can do this for you. Integral, there it is right there. Integral shadow, full, simple. And let me see if I can now put this. Let me try to share screen with you guys and see if that will come out. Share screen. I hit share screen. And then I go to this. And I go to share. That's not that hard. Okay, so you should be seeing it now.
It's not on Facebook.
It's not on Facebook?
Mm-hmm.
Facebook?
Oh, wait a minute. No, there it is.
It's coming. We're on delay.
Okay.
All right, there it is. So if you're familiar with Ken Wilber's system, I just described it here, but here it is on a picture. So we can actually look at a picture of it. See how I have the little red pills on the bottom? That's where the red pill community is focusing. They're looking at cultural evil. They're looking at the isms. They're looking at the totalitarianism. They're looking at the wokeism. They're looking at, if you're in a Christian perspective, you're looking at sin, religious sin, right? And so they're looking at all that stuff, or they're looking at the bottom right-hand quadrant. I called it the collective deep state right there. That's all the ways in which completely parasitic operations are integrated into the structure of society, it's the government, military, industrial complex and all that corporatism and all that, right?
A good example of what a problem is that if you are not, quote unquote, red pilled, and you understand that the information that you're given from mainstream media, from the medical system, from the government, that they're not your friends, and it's propaganda,
right?
If you believe what you're being told,
at this stage of things,
so I've heard people that I respect, they're like leaders in Jungians or different groups or integral, and they believe like
what comes on mainstream
they
TV.
believe that Zelensky is like
Ukraine.
A hero, right?
Right.
That's just one example.
Right. They don't realize he's a corrupt gangster.
They don't understand. They haven't looked into the history.
Like his counterparts in Western civilization, who are corrupt gangsters too.
Right, but
they go, "Oh, Putin's a corrupt gangster."
But see,
these other guys in the U.S., they're not.
So until you can open your eyes that the world is not what you thought, that you're not given
there's a lot of parasitism, societal parasitism that's integrated into civilization.
Then it's more difficult. It can be more difficult
to face the shadow,
to go deeper into your own shadow and your own compulsions, and realize that these people that you're projecting on as the evil ones, like Putin or whoever, that you
and it's like okay. No, go ahead now.
That you have that inside of you.
Yes.
And why am I triggered by that?
Right now, we're getting into the actual how do we work with it. And again, we're always talking about this.
Yeah, we don't.
But you know how Jung said that you hang your shadow on a hook. You find a hook in someone else to hang your shadow on. So you find, so if you're saying this person is selfish, this person is greedy, this person, is underhanded or manipulative or whatever, you're projecting onto them. A lot of times you've detected something that's real, but it's in the New Testament when Jesus says, take the log out of your own eye before you try to take the speck out of the eye of your brother. You've noticed that there is something flawed, there is something dark, there is something shadowy in the other person, but you're using that as a hook to hang your shadow on, and then you're attacking them for that, but you have it as much or worse than they do.
You can also do projection to an external, like scientific understanding, like climate change or like the world is going to end. Mm-hmm. That's another form of projection.
Yeah, getting into the concept of projection, we get into the way the psyche works in general. Projection is part of the way it even works.
Right. So
you can project all kind of contents.
So until you start to be able to understand the external or the cultural evil collective deep state.
Mm-hmm. That's what the red pill see. Yeah.
So people who already have that understanding have I think, a greater opportunity to go to this next level of understanding and work on your individual and personal shadow,
right,
which ultimately has an effect on the entire culture.
Yeah, in the same way, and this is you can use the whole example of a virus. Like Paul Levy uses the example of a virus as a metaphor for the way the collective shadow spreads. What Matthias Desmond is calling, what does he call it? Mass formation. When you're talking about how quote unquote evil or shadow behavior spreads and collectivizes people, you could use the analogy of a virus in that if you're susceptible, you're going to catch it and spread it to other people. But if you're immune, then you block the transmission. And the more immune people that exist in a population, herd immunity, they call it, the more of those people there are, then the faster the virus burns out. Mm-hmm. And amazing how we had the pandemic.
Right. We were like,
as a dream event, because we were using that understanding for several years, quite a number of years, and then it actually plopped out onto the world.
Right, and it was like walking and being part of the movie They Live, because we were in California at the time, in the Bay Area, and we were a very, very small minority of people
who saw through the whole scam immediately.
Through the whole scam. But imagine if there had been more people who could see the shadow and how it works.
It wouldn't have spread at all.
No,
it would have just been like a little blip, and it would have been, they tried this, they tried that, it didn't work out.
Right.
Well, we are now finding out that maybe universally about 20%, and this is kind of goes along with the Milgram experiment and some other experiments, other statistics, about 20% of the population is so individualistic or skeptical or has the ability to make their own decisions despite what authority figures are telling them, that about 20% of the population didn't get involved in the mass hysteria and didn't go for any of it. And so I think that it might have actually been more than 20%. It might have been a little bit like 25 maybe. But it seems like that number right there, if you go too far below that 20%, then you get these very these very fiery pandemics of mass hysteria, and that lead to they lead to totalitarianism and all genocides and all that kind of stuff. The more people you have above that 20% number, the faster it'll die out. It's kind of like how much wood do you have, dry wood do you have in a forest? It's another way to look at it when you have these events. So if you have been maintaining your own forest floor, right, and you don't have a whole bunch of dry wood there, or in the analogy of the virus, if you have general immunity because you're generally healthy, and in this case we mean psychologically healthy, then and physically, then you're not going to the virus of collective evil is not going to spread through you. So that's where, back to what you just said, we are responsible for the situation.
Yeah, and this is the main key, I think,
The big takeaway, right?
Is that we, the individual, is responsible for the evil that we see in our world. And that's very, very difficult for people to start to take responsibility for.
And because the territory is so vast, and like I said, I use the analogy of a bottomless pit filled with demons. That's what we kind of intuit is down there. And so it takes, and this is what's happening with us, and we're starting to see some other brave spelunkers who are going down there. You know, we're spelunking down there, and they got their lights and stuff, and they're going down in the cave, and they're going, yeah, it's creepy down here, but it's not what you thought it was. And there's a bunch of stuff down here, but we can handle it. And to demystify the shadow, demystify the unconscious, demystify evil.
It builds, and if you really start to work on your own shadow and work on your traumatized parts or complexes, you will have a greater compassion and love, or compassion, love, understanding for the rest of humanity, not as a concept,
right,
but in a very real way.
Right. These are people who are just because I have more because I have more tolerance or certain skill set that lets me get closer to the dark stuff, to the yucky stuff, and to work with it, doesn't mean that I don't get, that I don't get completely triggered, that I don't fall down just like anybody else does. It's just, I can ride the bicycle better than this person because I've been riding it for longer, but it doesn't mean that I don't fall down and get hurt too. We all do. And so it's hard for all of us. And so, yeah, you can have compassion for people who don't have really any experience, and they may not even have the skill set to really be able to do this at all.
Actually,
but again,
yes,
I just want that
humanity.
Percentage to go up.
Yes.
So
that's the idea.
Okay, so I think that'll be good for today. And if folks want to talk to us, I need to turn off the stop share. Let's do that. And I'll just keep the recording going here, and
yeah, it's still on,
and let that go, and we'll have that. And we didn't really talk about, people can go through our YouTube library, and we have all kind of, what is shadow work and all that. There's a number of videos up there on that, but we can talk about that today or whatever you want. Just if you guys can just unmute yourself if you have a comment.
Mm-hmm.
Peter, hi.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Good to meet you both.
You too.
Yeah, I've finally made it to one of these. I think it's been over a year since I've got the emails, and
Fantastic.
I've been meaning to do it. And I just wanted to thank you because I think even if we don't come to a conclusion about anything definite, it's so
Right.
important to discuss this
Mm.
and in a sense not let it be another shadow.
Yes.
Even
Mhm.
if we can't resolve it or agree or this and that, because I think there is a point where you do have to act. Like you were saying, you've been cleaning the forest. It's an action, whether that dirt is in somebody else or it's on the forest floor. Sometimes I think we do have to call it what it is, not in a
Yes.
resentful
I do agree.
form.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Yes.
not in a resentful form, realizing it is part of ourself,
Right.
but then you can really call it what it is, and I think the
Peter,
discussion is important.
before you go further, and I want to hear everything you have to say. But
That's,
with that right there, then how about this? Then it's acceptable and in fact necessary to take righteous action, right?
Right action.
To 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 stop the spread of evil when you see it taking place in society. But if you could do that while taking an account and responsibility as much as you can for how you might be projecting
yeah,
and how
yeah.
might right and how you might be influencing the situation, then that would be the most we could ask for.
It's very difficult, and
Yeah.
I know a lot of the times we go into this place where we just don't say anything, or just because we start reflecting it also back on ourselves.
Yeah.
But we
Right.
got to keep things moving. And I think we're in an interesting time now globally because we're all communicating. Our environment, who knows how that can support us.
Mhm.
And so it's sort of forcing us into taking a deeper look, maybe reprioritizing whatever it is. But I think what you guys are doing with at least this talk of this shadow, it has to be brought out.
Yeah. Thank you. And
Yeah, thank you.
and then I would just throw back on to you. I would say if you will then, and it sounds like you're already thinking about this, but the more you can actually take what we're saying or what other people are saying on this subject and scrutinize it and put it into your problem solving computer and go, okay, are they right about this? Are they wrong about this? Are they not seeing this? And challenge us and turn it into a think tank. Then that's going to be very helpful.
Well, that's why, I mean, I think even in the chat, I said, I'm a lifelong musician, engineer, and skier.
Oh,
Being
okay.
a lifelong skier and being part of a professional instruction institution, not now, but I was for many years, and it teaches you a refined aspect of balance. And it's always
Mm.
about balance because the pendulum's always going to swing.
Mm-hmm.
Like you guys were saying, even with the shadow, it's going to collect like dust. You cleaned your house, great. It's sparkling clean. 10 minutes later, there's going to be dust. So, it's about the balance, and it's a lifelong challenge. That's
That
why I like having some of these things to help teach us, like committing to a sport or music or
mm,
Mm-hmm.
whatever you want to commit to help you get a deeper view in this. I think Ramtha, if you've ever heard of her, Jay-Z Knight, the teacher,
I think
um,
so. Yes,
yeah,
Ramtha.
she's
Yeah.
been around for a while.
Yes.
But, I think one of the first things she does in her spiritual class is say, okay, forget about spiritualism. We're going to learn how to shoot archery because without the knowledge of archery in this case, your spirituality, you'll never find the balance of that. You'll never be able
Mm.
to sustain it. So she throws out a lot of this stuff and just teaches people how to focus their attention properly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
What you
it's
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, you just brought up, I just wrote down four key terms that you brought up there. intuitively. You talked about cleaning, how you clean and then the dust is back there 10 minutes later. You talked about balance, as in skiing. You mentioned commitment, how you'll never learn to balance unless you commit, and how that Ramtha's using archery to teach these kinds of things. And these are all, I would say, part of the solution to the problem we're talking about here, in that one way I've been looking for ways to approach this subject that aren't as scary as some of the other metaphors that have been used, like, kind of hero's journey stuff and finding and killing the dragon and, stuff like that, or battling demons. And it's just kind of, but that using the metaphor of alchemy, where it's about refinement and cleaning. It's about refining, continual refinement and cleaning. That right there. And then you said balance, which is kind of on the same thing of it's the same thing. Refinement is about finding the right balance. And then you said the commitment. Now the commitment actually takes me to what it kind of relates to. Commitment is saying it's related to boundaries, in that it's saying, I will do this. I will put in this many hours. I will commit to this much practicing. I will commit to not spending my time over here, but spending my time over here.
Right.
And it's about creating boundaries out of your time and your energy.
Yeah. And depth within the knowledge pool. You want to get deep like this. This is all about going deeper, and that's, it's hard to do.
Yeah. Do you know Robert Moore and his whole thing of the king, warrior, magician, lover? Have you heard of that?
I've heard of it. Yeah. I haven't.
It's kind of like the idea is that he sort of says there's 4 big archetypes or energies in the psyche. And so you have the big one is the royal archetype in a king or queen. It's sort of like the big organizing principle. And then you have the warrior, the magician, and the lover. And that these all have to be sort of discovered and balanced. And that he also has the shadow aspects of each of these. And so it's about addressing and balancing each of those. And so commitment goes in with the warrior attribute.
Right.
Yes.
And then what you were saying just now, what you mentioned about archery and about the going deep and stuff, that's the magician part of us, the problem solver that says, I'm going to figure out all the fine details that I need to know to master this.
And I've been criticized for that before, from psychics and different people, spiritual people, that say, oh, you want to figure out how it works. I'm an engineer. Of course I want to know how it works. And we can know how it works. The idea that it's untangible or you can't know, I think, is ridiculous too. Agnostic, I think they call it.
Yeah,
I mean, there is unknowable things, I'll admit that, but
of course,
that's not one of them. You can know yourself a little better.
Absolutely, it's a spectrum. It's with, so back to the magician is the engineer, is the impulse to want to understand yourself and the world and figure things out. I mean, I'm out here looking at the backyard and there's all these squirrels back there and they're all doing stuff because it was raining yesterday. And they have the magician mind. They're figuring it out. Okay, where did I put the nut, 2 days ago? Or is this a safe place to store stuff? Is this going to be here later? Is this wet? Is this dry? They're figuring stuff out. This is part of how nature works. And yes, we can admit, okay, there's always a mystery beyond what we can figure out, but we have to at least pursue this. We have to pursue understanding in general.
Well, that's the balance between what we call the 0 and the 1. The 0 is the more feminine, expansive, present. non,
Yeah, and
non.
it's more masculine to
Yeah,
be.
and the
Yeah.
one is, yeah.
And those are also the aspects of creating when you want to create
Right.
something. It's those
Exactly.
two aspects. You have to have the feminine. It's all birthed within there.
Right.
And that's where your thinking is, you know.
You know how the creative process works when you're trying to create something and how you're hammering at it and you're chiseling away at it, right? That's the will, that's the commitment, that's the masculine aspect. And then how you can't get through this anymore. What the hell? I'm trying to get through this, trying to get through this. Not. And so you let go.
Yeah, surrender.
You just surrender. You let go and you go, okay, I let go. And then you end up a few days later walking around the other side and going, oh crap, I didn't see that. And then you hammer at that and then you make it through.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it's fantastic input. And then
Well, again, thank you guys for doing this. I think it's really great.
You're very welcome, and you can chime in.
You're a
again.
music engineer?
Oh yeah, tell us about your engineering and musicianship.
Well, right now my console is broken. I'm waiting for a new power supply, but yeah, I do.
What's your console? I'm an
engineering.
engineer too, actually.
Oh, I have a Audion 4816.
Yeah, fantastic.
Where are you located?
I'm in right near Austin, Texas, but I've been in the San Francisco Bay Area for a long time.
Okay, great.
And I'm a mastering engineer primarily.
Oh, awesome. Wow.
Yeah.
I have to keep in touch.
Yeah. Imperial Mastering is my business. And I work with a lot of heavy metal bands mostly, but
we're both musicians.
We're both musicians
too.
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely. So is that your studio?
No, studios in there. I'm just in my kitchen here.
Right.
It's beautiful. I love the wood.
It's snowing out here. We're in Vermont. Oh. I used to live in Manhattan also.
Oh, yeah.
I had to get away.
Yeah.
When did you leave Manhattan?
Oh, about 25 years ago.
Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah,
my
beautiful.
parents lived there for a while, but yeah, I love Vermont. It's great.
It's just the winters and the snow and all that.
Yeah, I know. You got to ski or do something.
Right. Well, if you're skiing, absolutely. Oh, yeah. Well, that works out great.
I've always been addicted to snow. The first time I saw them make snow, I was like, wow, this is it. You know.
Oh, that's
awesome.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, snow in Vermont is probably in most cases a lot better than snow in Manhattan.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little cleaner out here, less dust.
A little cleaner. And when I was in Manhattan in the growing up in the 70s, early 80s, the buses, the exhaust pipe wasn't on the top of the bus; it was on the bottom.
On the bottom, yeah.
So the bus would pull into the bus stop. And there would be all that slush there at the bus stop. And then the guy would take off and just shoot all this, exhaust down into and there would just be soot and dust.
It's gross.
Then all the dogs peeing and pooping in
In a matter of hours, it changes. It goes from beautiful to disgusting.
Yeah. That's New York City in the winter. And then the wind that whips around the buildings.
And it's worse now than it was 20 years ago. Oh, yeah, because they keep building these buildings and it's just channeling the wind through the tunnels more and more. So my mom just moved out of there within the last year. So I'm happy not to have to go and drive anymore and go down there.
Great. Riddance. Yeah, in the old days, I mean, there's the dark side of New York and all those things, but then there was, the last time I was there was 2006, and I still felt this. It was shocking, actually, because I hadn't been back since the late 80s, and it was the energy, energy of just, you plop into New York and you get out and you're on the street, or it's just it's like I've been to all kind of cities all over the world, and there's no city that had the kind of energy that New York has.
I love New York. I remember coming in once from the train and I smelled the pee and everything. I said, this is great. I said, it smells so good. I was like, this city is awesome.
Coming into Grand Central Station.
I think it was Penn Station.
Yeah,
That's
little
smellier. A little more right on the Lower West Side there.
Yeah, it's got the light and the dark side of New York. It was an incredible place. Yeah. So great, thank you, Peter, and feel free to chime in again. Or I think we have Stephanie and Scott here. We'll see what they're saying, and come back anytime. And
thanks so much.
Great to meet you.
Yeah, great to meet you.
Yeah.
Do you guys want to say anything about our subject today?
Good to meet you, Peter, and great summary of what I feel, the appreciation for what they're doing. And this is the only place I can come and get that quadrant of fire, water, earth, and air going.
Oh, right.
Which is my favorite way to look at things.
The other way. Yeah.
And gives me so much insights.
Yep.
As well as I really appreciated the quadrant today of that inner and outer, personal and collective.
Mm-hmm.
I remember thinking, I want a copy of that. And things just got busy, and I never got back to Colin, but he put it up there today. So it was helpful to see it again. And I jotted down all those things. So now I have it. I think it's the basic map to, each one of those 4 areas in the quadrant are the major areas of work. You want to call it outer work, the great work, in society, and then the inner work. And neither one, they both depend on the other, and obviously the theme of this show and our talks and everything is that the inner work has to get done ultimately before you see real change, any permanent change in the outer world. And it's a very valuable map to have because, Colin's right. A lot of people are not going to come in through the inner work. They're going to be outer warriors. But when they see this map, then and they look around and they look at all the failures around them because, freedom movements are notorious for being infiltrated, disrupted, splintered. All your efforts, which you're a volunteer in the first place, all your efforts going to waste because there's so much
movements too. Remember?
Yeah. Oh my God! Look at the history, all the way back to World War II and the resistance movements. All of that we can learn from, and that quadrant is valuable for that reason because you have to draw the connections where you're strong, where you're weak. If you're going to be effective in the outer work, what kind of inner work do you need to do? And, going back and forth between those, as well as playing with the 4 archetypes of fire, water, earth, and air, of reality is extremely valuable for getting on the right track so that your efforts aren't wasted and your work is effective because the basics.
Ken Wilbert put this 4 quadrants out in the late 90s, I think. And there's a substantive integral community, or there was, and he didn't put evil or the shadow in there, and I can he didn't do it. No one else in the integral community did it, and when we can but they didn't. Yeah. When I go onto integral groups, wherever they are, and I look at what's going on over there, and I remember there was one integral group on Facebook, and you had all these quote unquote red pilled people who were waking up to political corruption. Integral folks, like a lot of academics, tend to kind of fall a little bit left of center politically in their mindset and stuff. And so these were people that were all, in that camp, and I had been in that camp, and they were challenging the integral community, saying, hey, look, let's look at our own kind of tribe here and all the corruption that's going on. And they didn't want to. And so they ended up kicking those people out of the group. Oh. And so when some function of the group, some immune function of the group tried to stand up and say, hey, you know, there's destructive activity here, we need to take a look at this, they said, no, get out of here. And that's the same thing that happens in the center or the right of center groups, conservatives or whatever we call them now or whatever. I remember back in the kind of Iraq war days where people were pointing out, hey, wait a minute, look at these Bush people, look at these Rumsfeld and all these people, and look at all this, you know, look, these neoconservatives and all this. Look at this huge history of nasty, horrible corruption and all of this. And they're like, no, we're not going to hear it. And they didn't want to hear it. And they threw those people out. And they had all kinds of sort of offshoot truth movements of people who were, you know, ostracized and split off, whether they're whatever side of the spectrum they're from. And that's still going on. It's going on as much as it ever was. And it's like, hey guys, and same thing with the Jungian community. I'm like, hey, I took the Jungian understanding of evil and the shadow, and I took the integral understanding of just 4 quadrants, and I just put them together. And I just said, I mean, it's taken me a long time to kind of put it all together, but intuitively it makes sense. And how come these people didn't do that? I'm you know.
Well, it's purely because of cognitive dissonance.
Because of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah. And the law of attraction feeds into that too. And Ken Wilber talks a lot about the beauty, but you never saw him talk about the shadow.
Now, check this out, though, Peter. If you look in Ken Wilber's stuff, in the integral community, they have something called 1, 2, 3 shadow work. Have you seen that?
No.
I'll pull one of their little books.
I got into Ken Wilber in the 90s.
Yeah. I really, I mean, you know, everybody has flaws or whatever, but I think what he's done is tremendous. Yeah. But he has there's this little book called Integral Vision, which if you ever want to kind of get back into it or share integral theory with somebody else, you can get this little book, and it's kind of he just takes you through the whole thing because otherwise you got 10,000 pages you need to read. But he's got in here, I'll find the page, 1, 2, 3 shadow work. And it's something like see it, talk to it, be it. Something like that. And it has to do with I, we, and it's. See it, talk to it, be it. And so when you get an epiphany that there's some aspect of you that you're trying to avoid, you see it, you talk to it, and then you put yourself in the like it's good for people that are triggering you, you know. So you see what it is that's in the air, what it is that what's the core of this, let's say anger or whatever it is, and then let's talk to it. Let's talk to that person or that. Imagine a representative of that idea and talk to it, and then imagine yourself being someone that believes that or has that idea or whatever. And so that is shadow work, and that's basic shadow work, and that's good. He also has a paper. It's a long paper called Integral Spirituality. It's like a 100-page paper, and there's about 10 pages or something in there about the shadow. And it is fantastic. It's really good, and it's really deep, and it shows you that Ken Wilber does have quite a deep understanding of the shadow, even though he doesn't really mess with Jung. He has an understanding of all this in his own way, and it's pretty deep. but that's the only place in his work. And he kind of figured it out and then kind of moved on. And the rest of the community does not have very much of this, and they don't want it. So, and it's the same thing with the Jungians. So the Jungians, if you have Jung's, like, let me have to pull this other book out right here. If you have Jung's understanding. Now, I don't want to say anything negative about the author of this book, Murray Stein. I think he's fantastic. And this contribution is that he's written about evil and the shadow and stuff a lot. And so he's one of the ones who is helping the situation in the Jungian community. But this is an example of how a Jungian like Murray Stein is putting all this stuff on the shadow and evil into the forefront in the community, but the rest of the community is not dealing with it. Or Robert Moore, who focused on it extensively and mapped out his own kind of 4 quadrants, and put it into a very clear light. And the rest of the Jungian community just sits on it. And then you have all this collective shadow stuff happening, and they're not jumping to it. They're not getting involved. I haven't seen a single person stand up and say, hey, I see all this really pathological stuff happening in the society, and including some of the stuff that's happening sort of on the left side of the spectrum, which is where the Jungians happen to be. And I see a lot of stuff in our own kind of tribe, so to speak, and it's pathological and it's shadow stuff, and we're going to have to talk about this. I'm not seeing a single Jungian stand up and do that. So these two communities and are two of many communities who are failing us. And so, we're going to have to come at it from out of left field and kind of just figure it out ourselves, because
seems that's what happens when these communities develop, that they degrade right away from I think because the people don't really get the essence of the original situation.
That's it.
I think
Jung said he's glad that he once said, or multiple times, he said, I'm glad I'm not a Jungian.
Right.
Meaning, I'm glad I'm not inside of some group that I'm going to be subjected to their groupthink. And I'm an individual. My name is Jung, but I'm an individual who's doing my own thing. And if somebody else wants to make groups out of what I'm talking about, that's fine, but I'm not in their group. Yeah. That is what happens. And I think that happened to Wilbur. And that's why I go on to integral community stuff. And I'm not happy with what I'm seeing there. But then I go turn on Ken Wilbur, and I'm like, I'm not going to blame him because his thing isn't the shadow. Doesn't
right. I mean, he nails what he nails. He's got what he's got. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why we do music, because, it's just a song. You can say anything in a song, and, you're not starting a movement necessarily. I mean, you could have followers, but,
Scott's a musician too.
Yeah.
Stephanie, you're there. Did you want to say anything? Stephanie? She's getting her.
Hello.
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 Oh, Stephanie's in New York City. She just moved there.
Yeah, I just moved to Manhattan. But listen,
we were talking about all that Manhattan stuff, good and bad, right?
But I appreciate it, because I've lived in many other beautiful places. So I don't attach too much to even a geographic location anymore. I tend to feel as though I'm going places for other specific reasons, other than my desire to choose the most beautiful place that I want to be in.
Right.
So, I don't know that this will be my forever home, but
Right.
It's very clear after being here for a couple of weeks that there's a very important reason for me why I'm here.
Good.
So, but yeah, I love what you're saying about the not placing yourself in a group. And I've felt this, we've talked about this already, this outlier perspective of drawing upon different communities, but not necessarily attaching to one specifically. And one thing that I've noticed with the people I've connected with from the integral and from the Jungian community is they tend to be more on the expert side of things within these communities. Yeah. But to me, there's always this huge gap in resonance with their experiential sharing or their shadow sharing, or whereas all of us are never afraid to shadow share. And there is this, to me, like Scott said, this balance between, you know, earth, air, fire, and water, the masculine, the feminine, the objective and the subjective, and experiential and not, like, there's this beautiful balance that it's really hard for me to find out in the world with others. And I understand that this has a lot to do with me and my continuation of my work. But I think that, you know, everything you said, I really love. It landed differently today. I feel as though either it's you are just continuously getting better on refining the way you're saying things, and also the way I'm hearing it. And being here in this location, I've already experienced a lot of interesting energetic exchanges, and the information landed really differently with me today. And I felt a renewed sense of shifting my vision hearing it today. And I think for the longest time, my own shadow, as you guys all know, except Peter, hi Peter, nice to meet you, was this feeling of necessity to connect these worlds of the modern healthcare system with this evolutionary process. And I understand that I'm not going to be the one to shift the system, or maybe I shouldn't have a direct desire to help evolve the system. But there's been this desire to take these two ends of the spectrum of, let's say, the surgeon with the patient experience. Like, there's been this desire to take these two poles and have them understand each other a bit more. And it was one of the reasons why I closed my yoga studios, is because I felt at that time like I was part of a cleanup crew of where the medical system failed patients. And instead of me accepting that, I went on this journey to try to somehow integrate this. And it's been real challenging. I've made some progress, and I continue to make progress. But here in New York, I see that in Houston, we're doing some work where we're integrating new peer mentors onto healthcare teams, which is great, because at least it's a reminder that each patient is a new subject in their objective reality. So that makes me happy. But here in New York, it's very clear to me that actually I need to do something separate. Like, if I want to be of service, I'll always be doing this work. But if I want to find a way to be of service and afford to live here and all of the things that come with, you know, being here in New York, it became very, very clear that I need to do something for patients that's completely separate from the medical system. Because here in Manhattan, I'm feeling this shadow of how the healthcare systems are functioning here, and the dominance of what's going on here in this city. And I felt like there's not a space for me to work with that system here. I must return back to this separate nature of me doing things for patients in my own way, connecting with myself on the deepest level that's not connected with them, because that only wants to limit the way I can connect with patients.
I wish it wasn't. I wish I could see it in a different way. And I wish I could say, well, you know, I think that if you just approach it from this angle or that angle, you know, we've been watching some interviews with this one gentleman. Do you know his name? You should look him up, and he's interviewed a doctor about psychosomatic pain and John Sarno's theory, and then he interviewed the Dutch guy about trauma and stuff. And there's all kinds of people who have been in the medical field, in that side of academia for their whole lives, and they're coming to realizations that the particular treatment or solution that they're turned on to, it's clicking for them, is not clicking for the rest of the community. And then they try for years to try to figure out kind of, how can I kind of get my community to kind of see this thing that I'm seeing, or how could I present this data to them, or how could I, get some funding to show them with a trial that what I'm saying is real. And they just, hammer at it for years and years until they just go, oh, okay, I'm going to talk to some other people. I'm just going to, turn my view towards another audience. And they kind of, a lot of people are maybe tenured, or maybe they're somehow plugged into the system after many years to where they're not going to lose their job.
This is it, Dr.
Chatterjee.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know who
Chatterjee?
Yeah. I know who he is.
Chatterjee. Yeah, a lot of good.
Chatterjee. Okay,
Chatterjee.
I remember that. Chatterjee.
I find him to be okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Still very consciously kind of behind the eight ball. Like really just I think that a lot of the traditional academics are just starting to awaken, and I'm not there, and I don't want to put myself there.
Yeah.
I want to be able to help the people who've already come a little deeper into this.
That's what I noticed from the two interviews that I looked at. That there's like, okay, great, you're going there, but we're further along. But anyway, that if you listen to all these people though who are coming out of the mainstream and they're kind of trying to find their own little way now, they're coming to they're kind of like splitting it both ways.
So far, I think Gabor Mate is probably the one he even has a whole
he's probably one of the most out there cutting edge people.
He's actually doing.
Yeah, so you kind of gotta, my point is, you kind of gotta just unplug from this matrix more and more and more, because and then you have to find a support system, you have to find a group, you have to find a community, a client base, however you want to see it, that is that's basically said, I'm just done with them. I'm done with them. That's kind of where you're going to have to come in.
Yeah, this is already happening with so many patients that I connect with that have lived with chronic illness for a long time, or have recovered from something very severe and have been in the system for so long. They are so burnt out. They've already experienced everything that modern healthcare practitioners are entering into post-COVID. The people who've had severe issues have already been through this many years ago. Like Melissa, you kind of understand this, is like these underpinnings of things that we've come to where we needed extra support outside of the system. We've come to this. So I'm finding lots of patients here who are at that point. They're at that breaking point, and they're actually trying to plug themselves back into the system to help. And they're realizing they're being used and abused and taken advantage of and not getting paid and this, that. So I think that I have a chance here with the community of people who've been through the failed system, been through it the ways that it helped, realize that we're missing the mark by such a high percentage. And I think that I'm just going to start my own community here. And instead of trying to penetrate myself anywhere here, I'm just going to start my own community here, and whoever wants to join in with me can join in with me, whether it be a patient or a provider. I'm not going to try to push myself. In Texas, that worked, but in New York, I'm not going to limit myself. I'm just going to do me and see what happens.
That sounds like a good plan.
Both are difficult to say, okay, well, I'm going to stay within this collective group. and then I'm going to do my best to influence them until I can modify the group. That's hard. Or say, I'm going to separate from the group and I'm going to get my own thing going, and that's hard. And so they're both hard, but it's which one is more true to where you need to go.
But what's kind of ironic is that what's working, and this is in a sense it's strategic, but it is working. And just like Peter was saying and Colin, you were saying, is that I have to return to the basics of balance, focus, exercise, not talking about yoga or Tai Chi.
Commitment.
Is like, if I were to say to the physicians, we're going to talk about how to get your patients more active. We're going to talk to your patients about, understanding why they're not taking their, whatever, like the basics, exercise, eating. Why aren't they eating well?
It's all psychological.
Yeah. And now they're listening. But if we can get people back into the mindset of what is going to help return myself to me, in my body, in my focus, in my commitment to myself, then everything else can potentially unfold. For me personally, that's how my journey started too. It was through yoga. It was through me attuning my focus and getting into my body and waking up and realizing, oh my gosh, I needed that discipline.
Yeah.
What if you hooked into a yoga studio and offered your services through
do your own classes?
Yeah.
I've looked into several here. I haven't looked into all of them, but it's very far away from what I'm trying to perceive. Like literally, I was at one the other day and the girl's like, well, ironically, what's happened is that just like another industry, when COVID happened, a lot of the smaller, more attuned yoga teachers and studios closed. And the only ones that survived were like Equinox and the big clubs.
Oh, yeah. I can see that. Yeah.
So the ones who were a little more attuned really suffered here.
I see.
And the studios I've been to, it's been like what I'm speaking is like another language. They're just looking to make money and try to get themselves up on their feet again. I haven't given up on another studio, but what I'm going to try to do is actually open a small community center here for people who are looking for deeper healing. I don't want to call it a trauma center, but I want to call it a place like, if you're not getting your needs met, let's explore some other options.
And so how do you get your where do you get your location?
Well, the good news is I have a couple of people who are backing my work, who are interested in providing a little bit financially. Now I'm in a super expensive area. But what I'm doing is I've been able to connect with some researchers from Virginia Tech. It seems like I can't connect with the physicians and the providers, but I'm finding a lot of support and connection from researchers, people who are doing new research. So I connected with 2 people from Virginia Tech. One is an ixercise researcher on how exercise improves patient outcomes. That's it. So now I'm saying, I want to make practical that which you study, and I want to put this into practice. So I'm starting to get these other institutions potentially be willing to back us up and have us have an actual place where we can demonstrate that their research works.
Right.
So we'll see. I don't know exactly how it's going to look, but that's my hope, is to get a little space here where I can start just providing we can do workshops, I can have speakers and have it go deeper into the stuff who the people who want to heal to this degree or are already seeking, at least they have a place to go.
Can't you just get a space that's, between this hour and this hour, 2 days a week or whatever, just a temporary kind of a, because what do you need? Just put some chairs out, some mats or something.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like there would be plenty of commercial real estate where they're like, okay, I'll do a month to month with you, and you could.
Yeah, there's a lot of empty spaces there now too. I heard.
Yeah.
Seems like you could get a month to month situation, and you could get something reasonable. And just say, we're not going to change the place. We're just going to kind of set up right here, and Wouldn't you rather get some income instead of none? And
right. Yeah. So it's definitely clear that coming into Manhattan from Texas, it's like, okay, Stephanie, you got to show up with your full self and do the thing as much as you can here. There's no teeter-tottering around anything. Like, you got to do the thing here.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard though. I mean, I'm in the same situation in my endeavors in life, going, okay, well, this is, I've, it's always, you're always trying to push the limit of your comfort zone and of your courage. And that's where you run into all your complexes and all your psychological stuff. And in the same way that the patient is not taking their meds and won't go for a walk because they have a complex that's feeding off the whole chemical structure that is giving them that's holding them in a state of victimhood. And there's sort of a stasis there, even though it seems like it's self-destructive. It's like an addict. It's self-destructive what they're doing, but the addiction and the substance, the chemicals that are released, the ritualistic aspect of it, it's all providing them with an inner state that they're not able to get anyway else. And so the kinds of courageous lifestyle changes and pushing of boundaries that's necessary for that individual once they quit that addiction is tremendous a lot of times. And a lot of times people just don't have the capacity to do that. And so it's the same thing with anything that's sort of self-destructive and pathological, whether it's, call it an addiction, or say they won't take their meds, they won't go for a walk, they won't do anything to help themselves, they're just laying there watching TV or whatever it is. Well, they're in a, it's the same way that people know that eating fast food or whatever is bad for them, and they just keep on doing it. It's the same way our whole society knows all these things that we're doing, that we're destroying ourselves, but we keep doing it because the whole parasitic infrastructure is tied into us. It's the ecosystem itself, and to break out of that psychic ecosystem is so hard.
Yeah, and the patient ecosystem, the massive amount of people I'm connected with from a patient, organ transplant, chronic illness community, is that there's one way to plug in to be of service, and that's back into the toxic ecosystem of healthcare. And what I've realized is I've worked with a lot of patients who they don't really know that there's another way unless they're a real deep seeker. So at least what I want to attempt to do is just say, this is just what I've done. This is just a different way. If you're interested in trying to do this more holistically and naturally, it might not be everybody's way. This is just my little piece that has worked for me. Mm-hmm. And if you want to explore your own self and how this can work for you based off of the work you commit to yourself, I just think there's a subpopulation that might be interested in doing it this way. Or they're kind of teetering on being there, but they don't have this little group of people to connect with to see that this is happening.
I got a suggestion for you. First of all, are you familiar with John Sarno's work?
Yes, not as well as I should, but you guys bring it up almost every.
If you go back into Sarno's work, get his last book.
Read The Divided Mind.
Read The Divided Mind as an absolute must. Go read that, and then compare what he's saying there with your own situation. And if you and so the idea there is that a huge percentage of chronic illnesses are psychosomatic, and that they are the effect of repressed emotions.
I believe that to be 100% true for myself, but I don't want to tell anybody that. I want them to come to that discovery on their own.
Oh, well,
the only way though,
my dad turned me on to Sarno this is how it is. It's people.
You give them the information.
You give them the information.
If they accept the diagnosis, then they're on their way. If they don't,
here's how it works in this, and there's a whole community around that. And so, what that Sarno's estimated that perhaps only 15% of patients that would come to him for back pain could accept a psychosomatic diagnosis as the reason for their pain, that there's a psychosomatic repressed element. In his case, he believed it was repressed rage. We believe it's rage and all kinds of emotions. But
or just the back.
What's that?
The back.
No, everything. Fibromyalgia.
So when he started
diseases,
he was focused on the back because that's what his area was. And but then over the years, he sort of saw how it's, oh man, it's not just back; it's all kinds of
migraine, headaches,
gastrointestinal disorders, fibromyalgia, everything that they call a syndrome that just showed up on the list, within the last 10 years or whatever. All those are psychosomatic. Carpal tunnel. Remember 15, 20 years ago, every cashier had a thing on for carpal tunnel. It's just, it's a meme. It's just gone now. And so these are cultural, psychosomatic, fashions basically. But and you have all different kinds of surgeries that become sort of fashions, and they kind of ebb and flow. But so the idea with the Sarno thing is this is how it works with Sarno. Somebody tells you about their disorder, their pain, their syndrome, their symptom, whatever it is, and you're familiar with the whole thing and whether or not that could fit in there, and you say to yourself, yeah, that person's that's probably psychosomatic. And then you say, well, tell me something a little about what's going on in your life. Oh, well, I just got a divorce and I just came out of a foreclosure and blah. Oh, okay, right. Okay, perfect. That's it. And then how do you feel about that? Oh, well, I'm trying to control this, that, and the other, and blah, blah, but I can't control it and it's really making me mad. Oh, okay. All right. So that's, you're in the category. And so you say, well, what do you think about this? And you turn them on to the subject. And if they go, well, I guess it's possible, then you go, here, read this book. And then out of the people that you do that to, Sarno says, he's dead now, but he did say 15% of them will come back and go, oh my God, you're totally right. And in fact, the pain started to shift immediately.
Do you know what is very important to what you're saying? I just want to say one last thing is that I think that this 15% sounds about accurate, and I think that's enough to work with. But even if you don't 100% buy into the theory,
right?
I think it's the only way forward.
It is.
It is.
Focus on healing.
It is. So you can start with, I think it's maybe part of my problem. It's not the whole thing. You can start with a little bit of doubt. And then you can go into it and you can go through the protocol.
I think
but then you build more and more faith in it over time as you get deeper into
I think in order to truly heal yourself of the chronic illness or the pain, you have to fully
go to 100% belief.
100%, because I'm seeing that now with this cycle that I'm in right now.
Yeah.
That there was just a small percentage of me that was still
saying maybe there's something genetic, maybe
hypochondria,
maybe it's
a major system that wants to try to fix it.
Right.
Without fully, I think you have to, in order to fully heal it, I do think it has to be 100%.
But you get there.
I agree.
You get there.
I think you can get there.
You have been. I've been talking you into it for years now.
Yeah, I know.
And you've been slowly but surely figuring it out.
Right, because I have an incredibly strong manager that wants to manage the whole situation and figure it out and look
for supplements
or whatever,
look for some special treatment,
change my diet or cleansing or whatever it is. All that is good.
I'm like, no, you just got to sit in the pain.
But that is not going to completely solve the issue because where it goes, it will go into old injuries.
It will always go to where you're weak.
Yeah.
But let me just say this. So Stephanie, so with this idea, if you go back to Sarno and you look at it and you're like, do you agree with me? This is an inlet. So what you have with this is you have an open door into this whole other field that you're already embracing, that you're already in. You have this thing that 15% of people can benefit from, and then they can manage their symptoms, their pain, their syndromes, or eliminate them through this. And now you also have an existing sort of heretical, I guess, or this existing movement with all kinds of doctors in it, and there's all kinds of the last book he wrote, The Divided Mind, has chapters from many other doctors and many other fields who are agreeing with Sarno, and this is how it works, and they're explaining it. And so you have this existing community. You go onto Amazon or wherever book reviews, and you read the reviews of Sarno's books, and it's just, this changed my life. This is how I healed from this kind of pain or this kind of syndrome. This, and it's been going on like that for years. It's changed me from somebody who's being able to manage symptoms and kind of blow them off, and they kind of come and go, and into what my mom is, is total hypochondriac that has to run to the doctor for everything.
Yeah. Now, and Colin actually at one time, and this is another thing that you can do, you can use John Sarno's name and hook into his process, his community.
Yeah.
And
then you can just open it from there and be like, and now we also have this, and we also have these ideas.
Right. Because Colin, at one point, you even were thinking, or I don't know, you might even have made a website. You were thinking of coaching people on Sarno.
Yeah, I made a sub website about Sarno and all that, and I put some flyers up in local Whole Foods or whatever. I got nobody.
Right. I know. But, if you're already hooking in with the patient community anyway.
But to me, it's fantastic. And it kind of shows me, I've been using it for years to kind of, it's almost like I'm a Freemason and I'm seeing who could maybe join the society. It's kind of like a test to see if you're awake enough, if you're advanced enough to kind of come in this direction. So I listen to them, and I've done this, so many times. I'll be at a cafe and somebody's telling them about their TMS. It's the acronym he uses for psychosomatic pain or syndromes. And I'll be listening to this whole thing, and I'll be like, oh, by the way, and I say, you should look into this. So I give somebody John Sarno's name. I've given the book to some people. I'll tell you one example, and people in the community know this for sure. I had a roommate once, and a lot of people who probably would have a hard time with this are extroverts and people who are not really oriented towards the inner world.
That's a brilliant. That's true. I think that the extroverts is difficult.
Peter agrees too. Yeah. Extroverts have a harder time with this. Introvert extroverts, people who kind of go both ways, have an easier time with it. But I had a roommate, and she was more on the extrovert side, and she was she was fine, and then all of a sudden she was complaining. Oh, she had migraine headaches. She was getting migraine headaches, and so she just kind of came and went in the house. I didn't really have much of a relationship with her, but I can't remember what her name is, but she was a roommate and in this house. And I said, oh, well, let me, what's going on? Let me just ask you some questions. And I asked her some questions about what was going on in life and stuff. And she explained to me what was happening with her fiance and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, okay, I see. You've got this extra stress that's going on right now, and that's what's leading to it. And I said, well, let me tell you about this theory. And I showed her the second John Sarno book, The Mind Body's Prescription. I didn't even give her a copy. I just showed her I had it. And I said, let me tell you this, what his theory was, and blah, blah, blah. And she listened. It took about 15 minutes. And I talked to her, and she walked away from it. She said, I guess, maybe, I guess it's possible. And then the next time I saw her, which was 3 or 4 days later, I said, what's going on with your headaches? She goes, oh yeah, my headaches, they're completely gone. And that was it. She moved out a month later or whatever it was, but and this is common in that field, that there is a percentage of people whose pain or syndrome is mild or new, and it's really just related to something that's happening right now in their life. It's not related to an old trauma. It's just the fact that their fiance called off the wedding or whatever, or something, or there's a foreclosure or something else that's going on. It's pretty big, but it's just something that's happening right now.
Yeah, it's like not necessarily super parasitic, like merged with the self, like a
exactly.
Trauma-based,
they're generally well developed and they're okay in life, but then this big thing kind of came in, and then all of a sudden the migraines or the back pain came on. Those kind of people, you can tell them about this, and if they'll accept it, even unconsciously, it was almost like a hypnosis session where some of it leaked in. And then that was enough to basically show her mind kind of a pathway out. And then it went out. And so that also does happen. And you can use that because it's a very honest thing. And you can say, there's 15% of people who can go in this direction and get tremendous results. And then there's a subsection of them that get immediate results. Now, people that have been in and out of the hospital for years, that's not going to be them. But
yeah, then you have to start, you can give them that, and then you have to probably do trauma work with them.
Oh, we can go on with that, but
yeah.
Well, thank you guys. It was very informative.
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. And it's great that it's working out over there.
Yeah.
Do you guys, Scott or Peter, want to say anything before we head out?
One more time, what was the name of the guy you said about his book?
Sarno, Sarno, John E. Sarno.
And the last book he wrote, I think, is probably the one you want to read, The Divided Mind.
Absolute must. In fact, yeah. It's in our book, Shadow Tech. We talk about it, and it's sort of like it's an integral chunk of our own worldview. And yeah.
Good.
How about you,
thank
Peter?
you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome, Scott. Absolutely. Thank you for coming as usual. Do you want to chime in anything before we go, Peter?
No, that's about it. Just very interesting. I've had bad back issues myself, and I've done genetic even meditations, and it was almost a 30-year thing. I did get the book. I think I got 5 of them, and I was giving them out.
Look at this guy. Okay.
But I ended up actually losing the nerve in my leg.
Okay.
And ever since then, I haven't had any pain, really. So it was sort of a sacrifice. I've dropped foot on my right leg, and you could see the bone. It totally got wasted, the muscle. And ever since then, which was about probably 8 years ago, I'm even jumping again on skis. So, So it was sort of, I sacrificed that nerve somehow, but the surgeon, they wanted to fuse 4 of my vertebrae.
Oh, no.
And the head of the surgical department said to me, if you get this done, you're going to be getting surgeries for the rest of your life.
Oh, thank God he told you
I
that.
walked out of there with my crutches, and I just said, I will deal with this on my own. I mean, I thought aliens were attacking me. I went through every possible door. I bought every possible healing device that anyone was selling or anything.
Okay.
But finally, I just had to turn the energy around despite whatever was happening.
Wow, that's great.
That's really great.
So now, you from the Jungian view of this, the unconscious, quote unquote, needed to resolve this through an ancient way of sacrifice.
I think so. I'm thinking that's what happened.
You actually went through it. It actually became a sacrificial initiation, and you had to lose some aspect of yourself physically,
yeah,
to actually change the circuitry.
And the pain was ridiculous. Even opioids did not help. I never got addicted because I was in so much pain to begin with.
I see.
But yeah, nothing helped. Nothing. The only thing they could do was knock me out. That was the only relief.
Has it shifted to some other symptom?
No. I've been good ever since. And I think the determination, because I was also having a lot of night terrors with this, it was around 2012, the comets were coming, the earth was ending, and all this compiled into a lot of trauma, extra trauma. And then finally I said, look, I got to own all this energy and own as much of it as I can. And and then I just changed my direction. I lost the leg, and I was
the whole leg.
Well, just the drop foot.
What's that mean, drop foot?
Maybe Stephanie can explain it better. I can show you. I don't know if I could. I can't really probably show you on this, but my foot, I can't pick my foot up, and the whole front of my leg, the muscle there is gone.
Oh, I understand right there. Yes.
Right. So I lost that part of my leg.
What's there now?
But I gained my leg. Well, it's the bone. You can feel the bone. There's skin covering it.
Oh, I see. So it can't tilt anymore.
I can't. So luckily I'm a skier. The ski boot holds me in the right position.
Oh, that's great.
Right.
And I had to compensate by, having a little more hamstring muscle on that leg. But, I'm skiing better than ever, more or less. Not
that's
as
awesome.
reckless because I'm older. So I have to be, and there you have it with the balance.
This is a pretty big thing, and so Stephanie, check that out. So that'll. So what do you think about that, Stephanie? That this big trauma cycle had been turning, and it unconsciously caused. It needed an actual sacrifice to lose a part of your body. What do you think about that, Stephanie?
Peter, the same thing happened to me.
Right.
Differently. So I had post my transplant surgery, I had taken so many steroids that I had caused severe avascular necrosis in my knees. And I had 4 surgeries on my left knee, and I had so much pain, couldn't walk. I was in a wheelchair for a year, and they said, your only option is a knee replacement. And you're really young. Knee replacements don't last forever. And, I don't know what to tell you. And as I was recovering from my illness and getting myself mentally, psychically back together, I realized I need to make a huge change in my life. I need to make a huge change. And I wasn't even specifically focusing on my knee that I could barely walk on. But I changed my job, quit my job that I hated, started to sign for a divorce. I went through all these changes. To this day, almost 10 years later, I have half of a knee bone in my left knee. I have no pain. No pain.
Amazing.
and that's in Sarno's whole thing too. In fact, that's how Sarno kind of figured out that this whole thing was that half the people that came to him, well, half of them had something wrong with their, the way it is some people have nothing wrong with their spine and they're reporting all this pain, and he's doing an X-ray or MRI and saying there's nothing wrong with you. then other people don't even know that they have fused discs or whatever, and they go to the doctor for some other reason and say, did you know that your spine's all screwed up and that should be hurting? And they're like, I don't know. No, it's not hurting. Showing you that the brain, the system, can bypass an area where, it's pain is a good thing in terms of telling you something's wrong. But when that becomes a nodal point where some kind of a complex is running on there, then that becomes the problem. And that it can, if you can make the psychic adjustment, just bypass that knee, just bypass that part of the shin, and then just go on and everything's fine.
Right. Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, I think they also looked at a lot of people who were 90 and over 90 who had absolutely deteriorated backs.
Right.
But no one was experiencing any pain.
Right.
And they found that this is really unusual.
So then that puts us back to the primacy, the priority of the psyche, and the so-called shadow work and all of the inner investigative work. And there is a mysterious part of it that's there's a lot of mystery in all of this.
Yeah, it's really amazing. Really
There's an aspect of a particular medication I'm taking for my organ transplant, which suppresses the immune system.
But then there's that aspect also. I was thinking you were going to talk about that because I didn't know about your knee. So then how do you put that in there? So you're a double kidney transplantee, right?
There's a lot that I don't want to get into right now with everybody here. But what I will say is I've been absolutely miraculously amazed at what my body has done when I've made some adjustments that I'm told not to make, and how I'm actually more healthier, blood labs, everything than most of the other people. So there's a lot of so much potential that we have.
Yeah, well,
super taboo.
And again, your story, I think you're in a fantastic position to be talking to people about these alternative things because you have the stories to back it up.
Yeah, and the John Sarno thing is just an added thing that you can hand to people.
Well, it could be like the door to get people in because it's not even that fringe anymore. There's a whole community around.
I might start just familiarizing myself with the book and maybe just having a club or a workshop on it.
Yeah, there you go.
That would be
that'd be great.
Inlet. There's a whole community on that.
Yeah,
if it only works for 2% of the people, well, at least it works for those 2%.
Right.
But I think the number is like 15 or something.
Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic, you guys.
Great call.
Fantastic, and we'll pick it up in 2 weeks.
All right.
Thank you so much. This was so unexpected. Thank you.
And you're absolutely welcome to come back next time or anytime you want to, Peter.
I'd love to. Thanks so much.
Okay, great. We'll see you later.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye, you guys. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And bye, Facebook. I think we successfully streamed.
Yep.
There's only shadowtechalchemy.com.
Yep.